So let's go over this. I want to kick this out really quick. So I've been reading Vertigo comics like for days now. A bunch of them have been coming out, and I'm gonna review them all. Everything that's new that's coming out. Obviously, I'm not reading other older Vertigo titles. Just sticking with the new stuff because this Vertigo has always been a passion of mine. New one today is House of Whispers #1. And this might be the first Sandman comic I don't like, or at least in this run. It's not terrible, but how to put this? Not a lot happens. It's written by Nalo Hopkinson. The art is fine, actually. It looks okay. There's nothing breakout amazing about this. I have to say this. It needs to be said. Other people are going to look at this comic and seriously say, like, hey, this was an SJW hire. I think that might be true too. Here's the thing about House of Whispers. Not a lot happens. It is much like The Dreaming. It is a lot of foundation building. It's here's the characters, here's kind of the setup. But the setup isn't, here's the situation. There's a party, and then a lot of characters are standing around talking, and nothing they really say leads to anything. I guess it's supposed to be describing the characters, but it's so slow. I mean, every page I'm reading in this comic, I'm going, you could have skipped these panels. You could have skipped this entire page. You could have... I looked up who Nola Hopkinson is. She's never written comics before, as near as I can tell. And this kind of demonstrates it. This is written like a slower novel, almost, where here's the situation, here's the setup, and it's like, this is a comic book. This isn't a novel. You need to go. You've only got so many pages. And if you don't hook your reader in the first issue, there's no guarantee they're going to read another one. And I'm very tempted not to read another one. I am going to give this one a try. I'm going to give it one more issue to redeem itself. But this is slow. It feels like taking a bunch of setting and characterization and stretching it out to an entire comic book. Nothing happens. Nothing of any weight or consequence happens until the last few pages. I mean, it's all like, here's the situation, here's this, I believe it's about the Jamaican Loa and stuff like this. I mean, it reminds me, I mean, there is a precedent for this. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the sequel to American Gods, the Anasi's Boys, where we're talking about this African mythos and these characters in a modern setting. So it doesn't come out of nowhere. Like I said, I think some people are going to look at this and go, this was a diversity hire. I mean, this is just, they threw a diversity hire. Someone who's never written a comic book before, who's going to be just a diversity hire. And boy, this comic book goes out of its way to tell me how awesome it is that lesbian relationships exist and that some people don't like them. And I'm like, what? Don't do this. Not in a Sandman comic. I'm still having border town flashbacks with part of this. I don't think it's the case, or at the very least, it's not written as poorly as border town. But it doesn't drive. It doesn't go forward, and it doesn't hook. Honestly, that's perfect. The random thing I just said. A comic book needs to do a couple things. It needs to do everything a normal book does. It's a form of literature. But at the same time, it has to do two other things. It has to move quickly because it only has a small number of pages unless it's a larger graphic novel format, where you're not doing a couple issues, but rather you're doing one big book from front to beginning, from beginning to end. It also has to hook someone. Like I said, if this doesn't hook me, if this doesn't get me to go, well, what happens next? Then I'm not going to read the next issue and we're done. And the comic book as a series has failed. The comic book itself might be very well written and might look beautiful, but if I don't care about what happened, and more to the point, I don't care what's going to happen, then I'm done. It's failed. It's a failure. I don't think this is a total failure, but it is slow, and it is very meandering, and there's nothing hook-like until the very end of this comic. There's this thing about this book. There's a magical book or something like that. We don't even see anyone interacting with it or describing it until the very end of the thing, until the very end of the comic. And I'm like, if this was relevant, we needed to see this at the beginning. If the events in this party or whatever that's happening on the magical riverboat or whatever are relevant, don't front load them. Spread them out a little, or compress them. One of the two. Like maybe make some of these events happen in another comic if they're absolutely that important. And if they are not absolutely that important, then why are they in this book? Why are they in this very tiny comic book where you only have like 20? You have like most 20 full pages to write stuff on. You cannot waste time like this. So, like I said, some people are going to read this comic and think this is an SJW diversity hire, and I don't know that they're wrong. But at the same time, they might not be right either. I mean, this might just be we're trying to get the same theme as Anansi Boys or American Gods, like that sort of novel, and weave it into like the Sandman universe, where it does fit very well. So, but at the same time, we've gotten some author who has never written comic books before and isn't writing this comic book very comic booky. So, I don't know. I would say, like I said, I'm going to read one more issue of this. I'm going to give this one more chance. If you're considering buying this and reading this, hold off for a little bit. I mean, I'm not the only one reviewing stuff. They'll tell you much the same thing I am. In fact, I suspect some people are going to react a lot more negatively to this and be a lot less forgiving than I've been. I would hold off on a little bit. Nothing stops you from getting back issues in this day and age. I'm getting all this stuff on Comixology, but there are other comic book subscription services too. You can always get back issues. I'd hold off on this one. I'm not going to flat out say it's terrible, but it isn't great. It is below C grade, and not a lot's happening. And that's no good. I mean, whatever else the motivations and so on, if they're presented poorly, or in this case less dramatically, they're going to fail in a comic book. And I think it's getting dangerously close to that. That's all I really have to say about this. This one's kind of let's wait and see how this one turns out. Let's look at one more issue. But otherwise, that's all I got. I'm out.